we're all trying to just lower life.
What he'd done is he'd opened his wrist up, and he had a gusher, like it was spurting out, and the whole of the cell floor was covered in blood.
But even your visitors are spoken to like animals, you know what I mean? And they're coming in and they're getting strip searched, and your Benz is getting searched.
Durham jail is overcrowded. There are nearly 900 prisoners crammed into the cells when the official capacity is closer to 600. There are fights between inmates almost every week. There's a rising suicide problem, and 1 in 10 prisoners regularly tests positive for drugs. And yet, Durham is amongst the best jails of its kind in the country. It's clean, well run and efficient. The prison officers don't rule the landings with an iron fist, and most of the inmates are content to tick off the days of their sentence without causing too much disruption to the system. The problems that beset Durham are the kind that almost every penal institution in Britain is facing at the moment, and Durham copes better than most. It's one of Britain's oldest prisons, and a list of former inmates reads like a who's who of crime. In 1873, the serial killer Mary Ann Cotton, who poisoned 14 people, including her children and 3 husbands, was hanged in the courtyard here. And since then, the likes of the Moors murderers, Myra Hindley and Ian Brady, John McVicker, the Cray twins and Mad Frankie Fraser have all peered out from behind the bars at some time or another.
Durham then had a fearsome reputation. It boasted that any reforms that come out in prison, they were the last ones to put them into practice.
Mad Frankie Fraser is a former gangster who performed his own brand of amateur dentistry in London during the 1960s. He spent 10 spells in Durham between 1953 and 1982, and he claims he was regularly beaten up by the prison officers.
He said, "Name!" Francis Davidson Fraser. Wanted me to say, "Sir." Just wouldn't say it. But I knew what was going to happen next, so I got in first. And I turned round, I was very thin, but very fit, very wiry, and slung a lovely punch at the nearest officer to me. With that, the sticks, the truncheons, rained over my head, knocked unconscious, and took to the strong cell. Well, I'm smothered in blood. About an hour later, I was taken over to the hospital, where the doctor put 27 stitches in my head.
In the last few years, the stories coming out of Durham have dried to a trickle. Huge sums of money have been spent on improving security, and there's been a shift of emphasis away from punishment to rehabilitation. It's a philosophy the Governor, Dave Thompson, tries to put into practice whenever he sits in judgment over prisoners who've broken the rules. This morning, he has to deal with an inmate who pocketed his prescription drugs instead of taking them when he should have done. Usually, when prisoners do this with tablets, they try to sell them or keep them until they have enough for an overdose.
Do you agree with what the reporting officer says?
I was saving it for a later time. Because I was going to the gym.
Okay. Why did you crush it up?
I had it in my mouth and taken it back out.
And you realise you're not doing yourself any good at all by not taking your medication at the prescribed times, which are equally important as taking the medication. Do you understand that?
Yes.
In this particular instance, because you've got a good wing conduct report, because you've never come to my attention before, I will take the caution as being the only punishment that I will give you. What I'm saying to you now is, take your medication when you should be taking it. It's for your own good. And let's not see you here again. Okay?
Yes, sir.
That clear?
The emphasis might be on rehabilitation now, but walking through the prison gates for the first time is still a daunting prospect for most.
It's quite frightening, because you don't know actually what to expect. You don't know what people's going to be like. Before I came in, I'd heard about blokes getting raped off other blokes, people getting hit. violence in the prisons, and it does frighten you a little bit before you come in.
The first 24 hours in prison are often the most traumatic, and the governor invited me to see what life was like from an inmate's perspective.
Just put your arms up to your side. Have you got anything on you shouldn't have? No. Have you brought anything from court you shouldn't have? No. Right, you just make your way through there and up the stairs.
The prison officers on the reception desk look for signs that new arrivals might try to harm themselves. But in spite of the precautions, the number of suicides at Durham, like many other jails in Britain, is rising. 12 inmates have killed themselves here since 1990. There were 2 last year, and already 2 this year.
What he'd done is he'd opened his wrist up, and he had a gusher, like it was spurting out, and the whole of the cell floor was covered in blood. He was still conscious at this point, and he was shouting and screaming that he was going to slash his neck. Just quickly assessed the situation. In my opinion, he was going to die if we hadn't gone in there. And what I tried to do was nip the vein and apply direct pressure to the wound, because it was a particularly bad one. In between all that, obviously, would call for medical assistance, and I just tried to do the best I could for the lad until that assistance arrived.
I was on nights, and I heard the cell buzzer go, and I heard a banging on the door. I went up to the cell. There was 2 inmates in the cell, and one of them had indicated that a prisoner had hung himself. I opened the flap to inspect. I couldn't see anything, to be quite honest, but I asked him to move out the way, and I noticed at the back that there was a gentleman hanging at the rear of the cell.
Does it prey on your mind, perhaps, that you could have got there earlier and that you could have saved his life?
Me personally, yes, it did. It did prey on me, and it still does. It is difficult to talk about it, and it's something that I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life.
Right, and look at the camera up on the wall.
After they've filled in the necessary forms, new arrivals have the customary photographs taken. Then they're strip-searched for weapons, drugs or anything else they might be trying to smuggle in.
Right, Burston, could you just come forward? I'm going to get you to sign for the 3 items of clothing that we've just put into box number 20. You'd just like to go with this officer here to show you where you can pick up your prison clothing. Okay?
Right, if you pick your shoes and socks up. Just make it perhaps get yourself some clothing. There you go, mate.
Thanks. Thank you. Shortly afterwards, the new inmate passes through a maze of doors and gates to the main body of the prison. As he walks along the landing to the cell, he tries to take in his new surroundings, and his new surroundings try to take him in. I've been invited to spend a few hours behind a locked door here at the prison to try to get some sort of insight into what the inmates really go through. In some ways, it's a ridiculous proposition, because if I really want to, I can get up and leave. So I won't feel the kind of isolation, alienation, despair and loneliness that the inmates here really do feel. But perhaps by sitting and listening to the sounds outside and thinking, I will learn something. Over the next 6 hours, I collected my food with the rest of the prisoners and sat, like them, waiting for the key to turn again in the lock. I'd expected the inmates to know I was a journalist, but many just assumed I was another new arrival, and a succession of people banged on the door to ask for tobacco or to find out why I was there. That was a really unsettling experience. First, it felt like a game. Of course it did. But then after a while, your imagination plays tricks, and every sound, every crash, every bang outside made me feel more nervous. I tried to think of my family and friends to take my mind off the sounds, but you feel more lonely because you can't be with them. So as I say, a really unsettling, disturbing experience. And while I am glad I did it, I wouldn't like to do it again. For the inmates at Durham, the day begins at 8:15 when they're unlocked from what they call their pads and they head for breakfast. There's no separate canteen, and when they've collected their food, the inmates go back to their cells to eat. Then it's education classes, exercise or work, depending on their timetables. The most popular jobs are in the net shop, where they make goal nets for 60% of clubs in the Football League. But making nets isn't as easy as it looks.
That's perfect, isn't it? Near enough. So, tell me what you think about working in the shop here.
But I've been in the shop for about 15 months now, and I like it. It's just, I've never done anything like this before, so it's all right.
And how much do you earn? How much do you earn?
£11.90.
A week?
A week.
Do you think that's a fair return on the effort that you put in?
No, no, it's definitely not. But you don't really need a lot when you're in jail. So it is a high-paid job within the jail. So I enjoyed for that as well.
And if there was no work, of course, you'd be spending more time, I guess, inside your cell.
Yeah, which it's good to get out yourself. So this is ideal if you get full time. So get you out your pad most of the day.
Education in prison is no longer just a case of passing round the paintbrushes or helping out with letters home. It's now seen as a vital part of rehabilitation, and at Durham there are classes to improve numeracy and literacy, and courses designed to help inmates work out where they've gone wrong and why.
So what do you think led you down that path, like both of you?
It's nothing to do with family, so it's nothing whatsoever to do with families.
I think a lot of people all think it is. I totally agree.
People like these in these establishments think that because you're bad, your upbringing's been bad and your family's obviously bad, the way they treat them when they come in on visits and that.
Right, mine's money, but it's partly money for drugs. That's all mine was for. When I was thieving, I was thieving with friends, people I knew.
So you think you were like easily led into it? Do you think that was the problem?
During the day, if the prisoners aren't working, studying or eating, they're usually exercising. And in the gym, it's easy to see how the relationship between inmates and officers has changed in recent years.
All the way down. You should go all the way down. That's better, all the way.
A couple of years ago, they weren't helpful, and now I think it's all changed. Like, it's different regimes and whatnot. And they're more, like, talkative towards inmates now. They're not standoffish, whereas they were before. If you've got any problems, you just go and ask.
Of course, even today, not all of the prisoners get on with all of the officers all of the time.
Every time you want something, it takes them forever to answer the bells on the wing. I'll just turn it off, and then you've got to press it again, and when you're pressing it again, they're coming up, and see and keep off the effing bells, and if you're not dying in the pad, they won't dine out for you.
But while we were there, the majority of inmates had positive things to say, and the atmosphere is probably now more relaxed than it's ever been. The wings are still no place for anyone with a nervous disposition, though.
Let's receive the alarm bell, Delaware.
Ed Gatenby has been in the prison service for 13 years, and he's one of 6 senior officers in charge of the landings. His job is to react to incidents and deal with prisoners who are being disruptive. This time, 2 inmates were fighting over a cup of hot chocolate, and one of the men had to be handcuffed.
There's been 2 inmates fighting in a cell. An officer has heard the commotion in the cell and gone to the cell. He split the inmates up, and what we've done is we've brought what we class as the aggressor. We've brought him down now. We'll then go back up later and interview the other inmate who's in the cell with them.
A few hours later, Ed Gatenby had to react to another alarm at the prison hospital.
He was throwing his chair off the back of the cell door. He was throwing the locker around the cell and just banging his head off the door.
Was he threatening staff?
Oh no.
So just damaging
the cell.
Whenever an incident seems to be getting out of hand, the officer in charge calls on a specially trained control and restraint team.
We're going to come in there and we're going to drive you towards the back of the wall using a short shield and 2 other officers. We're going to pin you against the wall, remove the weapon, get rid of the weapon, get rid of the shield, put you under restraint and bring you out of the cell.
Come on! Come on! Burris Ashford, I'm giving you an order to come out. Okay, team.
Come on! Come on! Come on!
The other way! Lock on. Up here. Back.
There were fears the control and restraint teams might have to be deployed a lot more often after a recent decision by the governors to scrap what's known as Rule 43. Under Rule 43, inmates who felt they were likely to be victims of aggression could demand to be separated off from the main body of the prison. It was designed to be a form of protection for sex offenders or inmates who'd committed crimes against children, but the governors argued too many people were being segregated.
We took the view that if you lived in Hastings Avenue, there wouldn't be part of Hastings Avenue which was secluded from the rest of the community, and we wouldn't make any seclusion here either. But we would take action against anyone who decided to offend against those people.
Previously, Rule 43 had been scrapped at only one other jail in the country, and at first even the prison officers at Durham were concerned.
When they took away Rule 43, I think there was a lot of prison staff who were really worried about it because we thought that there would be a lot more assaults. We feared for the prisoners as well as ourselves, because at the end of the day we would be the people who would have to go in to support and help these people.
In the few months since Rule 43 has been abandoned, there hasn't been a rise in the number of assaults at Durham. The figures stayed constant at around 30 a month. But one man who may well regret the change is a former remand prisoner called William Todd. In April, he came into this courtyard to exercise with the other inmates. He was waiting to be tried for a charge of indecently assaulting a young boy. And, although he was later found innocent, William Todd was attacked by a gang of prisoners who smashed him in the face with a rock. It remains to be seen whether or not scrapping Rule 43 makes the prison a safer place, but it has received support from a rather unlikely source.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. Let them get knocked about, no, I mean it. I ain't a good guy, obviously. 42 years in prison, but women, children, untouchable. Absolutely. And therefore, take away that protection, definitely.
Back on the wings, the monotony of prison life for the inmates is broken up by visits. The hours they spend with family and friends are a chance to step back into the outside world. But in the past, some prisoners have taken advantage of conditions in the visiting room. They've been caught with contraband from files to live ammunition. But the most common problem is drugs.
It's quite unbelievable, some of the scenarios that I've witnessed where people have attempted to bring drugs into prison. They've used babies, children, and methods which you would find quite unimaginable.
It means the regime has now been toughened up. Banks of cameras have been installed, visitors are searched, and sniffer dogs are regularly brought in. But some inmates complain the new rules go too far.
But even your visitors are spoken to like animals, you know what I mean? And they are coming in and they're getting strip searched, and your Benz is getting searched. My Benz only 1 year old, getting searched. Dogs sniffing you. A pal of mine, just because the dog sniffed his loss and the dog sat down. That's the officer's way of knowing that you've got drugs on you if their dog sits down. This lass didn't have a note on her, so she didn't get a visit. She travelled all the way here and she couldn't get in.
For the outside I yearn, like all inside, whom I'm sure at some time must have turned and cried. For the outside is a place we all should be, not locked up in Durham behind doors with no key.
Martin Vickers has been writing poetry since he came into prison a few weeks ago. He's serving 3 months for breaching a court order that banned him from seeing his children after his relationship with his wife broke down. Today, he's expecting a visit from his mother.
It's the only access you've got to the outside life. People, what people don't realise, that the people who come to visit you, is once you walk through that door and you go into the visiting area, it's a totally different world. It's like a bit of normality back, but once you come back to the other side of the prison, you're straight back in the regime.
Like the other visitors, Ada Mae Vickers has to wait while her son's told of her arrival.
Nice to see you.
How's things?
Not too bad, and yourself?
Not so bad, not so bad. Ben's all right?
Yes, they're fine.
Afterwards, Ada Mae often goes for a walk in the park just next to the prison. Sometimes she sits on a bench by the river or watches the college students who aren't much younger than her son. Ada May knows that when Martin's released, it won't be easy for him to put his life back together.
Well, people outside judge a lot of people that's inside, and they don't know the circumstances for one thing, because each individual is in for different things. And the people they're inside, they're still human beings, and they've got families, and they care for them, and they love them, and they miss them.
She was telling us about the children and all that, you know, which is, she knows is very important to us, and they're getting on okay, they're enjoying the nursery and that, and she's been taking them out, one thing and another, taking them to the shops and that, and basically put your mind at rest, you know, when you get to hear everything's okay at home.
Martin Vickers has another 9 weeks to wait until he's released. Mick Blundred is going home tomorrow. He's served 15 months after being convicted of conspiracy to steal, and he's passed much of his sentence working in the gardens. So far, he hasn't got a home or a job to go to.
That's what I'm looking forward to, getting a job, but not many people want to employ people like me. So the problem nowadays.
Do you think that there is a stigma attached to, like you say, people like you?
Yes, there is. There is, because people label you, oh, we can't trust him because he's an ex-con, and it's really not fair, because you can't trust us. We're the most likely people to trust, especially if we changed. If people change, they're not going to go back to crime. Then why don't people give us a chance?
And do you think you've changed?
Aye, I'm worth a chance, yeah.
The following morning, Mick emerged with a new haircut,
Hi, Mick.
but he seemed less optimistic about the future.
So you've had your hair cut?
Oh, I had to feed him, so I thought I'd get my hair shaved.
And do you expect to be back?
Probably. It's not yes or no, but probably will be back.
You do expect to come back?
Yeah. Well, convicts, so everybody expects to come back if you lead the life I do. So.
Have you got somewhere to stay? I know you told me the other day that you got nowhere to stay.
Got a hostel to stay in for a bit. So.
But nowhere permanent?
No, not yet.
Okay, good luck.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
See ya.
Cheers.
As Mick takes a taxi to his new life, the 800 or so inmates he leaves behind begin another day of the same routine. Even at Durham, where rehabilitation is now the guiding principle, only about half of the inmates manage to put the past behind them. For whatever reasons, the other 50% find that within 2 years of walking through the prison doors to the outside world, they're walking straight back in.